jumping in with some God-tier tactics, and we're going to have the duality of range versus close combat. Now, some of the factions, some of the warbands have a mix of both ranged and close combat. Slayer Rangosh comes to mind with being a close combat beast. I'm still absolutely just a powerhouse, considering that this God-tier champion is still from wave 1, still really holding well. But the warband itself wants to operate at range. So this idea of your followers, your warband, your champion, ranged versus close combat. Now, in terms of ranged combat, when we're talking about a skirmish game, we're looking to do two things. We're looking for, of course, removing models. And in the case of God-tier, as models get removed from play, you can spend resources to bring them back in. So they're not permanently removed, but there is a tax, a penalty, a resource that you have to pay to get them back on the table. So there still is an importance as a player. I'm looking to remove your units, your warband, your miniatures, your assets, whatever label we want that to have. I'm looking to do that. Second, of course, area denial. Yes, we're going to battle over God tiers. Yes, we're going to battle for position, but I'd like to just block things. I'd like to physically prevent you from reaching mission goals, or at least have to spend attacks to get to those mission goals, or at least allow me to attack you to get those mission goals. So what we're looking at, generally speaking, is if I have a unit, whether that's my champion or the followers, I want to be able to attack and make those attacks, but also occupy key points on the hex map. Now, those points, of course, are beyond the scope of this Tactica vlog because it depends on the mission, depends on the warbands. Some can create tier piles, manipulate tier piles, move tier piles, and of course, the missions themselves. Some tiers spawn, some tiers disappear. The battlefield is absolutely dynamic, and that's one of the amazing things about the game, in that it's not static for the entire time. It regularly shifts. When I have a dedicated ranged warband, or I have a dedicated ranged champion, now we get into the question of, on the one hand, I want to stay far enough away that if we have these mission goals, I can plink at you. I can start racking up points, but you can only return the damage by a similar ranged unit or by advancing, moving up to me, right? And engaging me. In that case, if we're fighting over, say, a pile of tiers where my champion wants to plant the flag and my followers want to kind of block it off on one side, then if I have a ranged unit, I want to park that ranged unit away from where the action is. Not so far away that I can't respond and, of course, be out of range, but essentially, if my opponent has a more close combat, 1 to 2 hex ranged attacks or influence, they have to make a decision. Go to this area, right? Camp on these tiers or camp near these tiers to claim and support. And now every turn I'm getting hit again and again and again and again. Or take some units and go off and engage the ranged unit. And now we're fighting on that. Maybe get some points either way. But that's pulling you away from those objectives. So that's kind of the decision making that you're giving your opponent for a ranged unit. Now, in terms of playing one, it's opposite in that to use a ranged unit effectively means I attack you, you have difficulty attacking me, unless you're in position, but then I pull you out of position. What that means, though, is if I camp near tiers, or if I have a champion that camps on tiers, then I'm missing out on the tactica of being ranged. Yes, I can make attacks at point blank. Yes, we have those opportunities on there, and sometimes the ranged attacks will be more powerful at point blank. But what am I really gaining in terms of warband composition? I'm not using the range to that full effect. And that's not to say sometimes that happens or doesn't happen. Obviously, playing 1 warband, 2 warbands, or 3, if I'm playing 3 and I have 1 dedicated ranged champion and warband, then I can make up with the synergy with the other 2. If I'm playing 2 warbands, that's where things get a little bit interesting because I've got to make some hard tactical decisions. If I'm playing 1 warband, then there are some missions that I'm going to play that I'm just not able to take full advantage of the range because I'm going to have to plant the flag. I'm going to have to claim. the banner. I'm going to have to smash banners down. I'm going to have to block off tier pits and see what I can do with that. All those aspects. So when we see a ranged unit, how that plays in the game and looking to take the most and greatest advantage that we can versus a dedicated close combat unit. And of course, there is synergy. There is duality in that not all warbands are just range or just close combat. Some are a mix of both. Some champions are dedicated to one or the other. The followers are dedicated to one or the other. So there is a little bit of play back and forth with that to take into consideration.